More than 50 countries have reached out to the president to begin a negotiation. But they're doing that because they understand that they bear a lot of the tariff. And so I don't think that you're going to see a big effect on the consumer in the U.S. because I do think that the reason why we have a persistent long-run trade deficit is these people have very inelastic supply. They've been dumping goods into the country in order to create jobs, say, in China.
Remember this. They're calling. The president just said today that Japan was calling. Israel's here today. Vietnam. They're all trying to get a deal. So yes, 3 days of your 401k going up and down like an EKG, I get it. Not great. But in the long term, if we can do things that get manufacturing back and greater market access, is it worth it? Or would you rather keep getting ripped off for another generation? All right, guys, I hope you had a great weekend. I think I got one of like 11 things on my to-do list done, but that seems to be the case every weekend. As is always the case, it almost should be just, I should stop saying it, but wow, did Trump just crush it? I mean, what a weekend, a lot going on. He managed to, by the way, fit in winning the senior club championship or something. And it was funny because all these people are like, is it a good luck that he's playing golf? It's not like, I think people are missing the point in this. Do you think he's not working? I mean, that was the issue with Biden. We never actually knew if he was doing anything. And so when he had been criticized before for some of his activities, part of it was, well, we don't know what he's doing. With Trump, I think most people would say, I wish you played more golf and did things. On the critics, the folks on the left and the media, I think are so tired of trying to keep up with the guy that they would actually like him to play more golf. That's not a thing. But anyway, a lot going on. On Friday, these jobs numbers came out, 228,000 jobs created in the month of March, which, by the way, is almost double what the predictions were supposed to be. In fact, it may be more. Like, so every time somebody, and the reason I say this is this, all of these economists and experts, you notice how often they're wrong and no one ever says anything. They go, all the economists say the following, right? But then they never tell you, well, their track record sucks. It's like the weatherman sometimes. Like I get up and I'm like, nope, it didn't rain yesterday. And you get up today, there's no accountability. These experts all the time love to talk about everything the bad's going to happen. But when they're wrong, like, for example, in the jobs market, I'm glad they were wrong. We had 228,000 jobs created. They only thought we were going to get 140. They were wrong by a lot. And no one said, oh, yeah, the same economists now are predicting a recession and predicting that. You know, it's amazing when you're one of these predictor types people, you can always be wrong and there's no consequences. But anyway, I wanted to start with that because this is important context. All these people who love to predict everything. Remember, I think about this, just even like the deficit folks, the CBO and the OMBs, they're always wrong. They say something's going to cost this much. They're never right. There's no accountability, is there? By the way, the Labor Department announced that it's returning, check this out, $1.4 billion in unused COVID funds. Now, I'm as excited as the next guy because that's kind of cool. But it begs a bigger question. Why did we appropriate money like that without having any sense of who it was going to, how it was going to go? Again, same thing with the predictors. Think about how off you are. How much money do we need for COVID? 15 billion. It's always a round number, isn't it? We need 15 billion. How'd you come up with that number? I don't know. If we're giving back 1.4 billion from the Labor Department alone, and remember Governor Ron DeSantis a couple weeks ago talked about how much he was giving back? Do you wonder how much more there really is that people just took advantage of and scammed or is sitting in some stupid account somewhere? Again, no accountability. Because to me, the bigger question is, why did we appropriate all that money if well over, let's at least call it close to $2 billion? But again, because no one cares. It's not their money. That's why Doge is important. That's why so many of the other policies are important. Because they all have lacked accountability. They do whatever they want, blow the money, because no one cares. No one in Washington pays a price for it. So I'm glad they're doing it. There was also a big win for the president at the Supreme Court. They are allowing him to cancel up to $65 million in teaching grants. And again, this is important. It gets back to this idea of, does he have the right as the executive? I talked about that with Josh Hammer last week. He's the executive. No one would have a question if you were misappropriating monies or if it was like fraud, right? So why can't he cancel other stuff that he doesn't think is being used properly? But that was good because I think it starts to set a tone of where the court is. And I will say this. He obviously tariffs is dominating. We're going to talk a lot about tariffs today because I want you to understand where the administration is, what's driving them, what they think is going to happen. The president talked about that last night. I want you to play a clip just to get some sense of where we're going.
When they look at the fact that we have $1 billion trade deficit, when you look at the trade deficit that we have with certain countries, way over $1 billion per country. With China, it's $1 trillion, and we have to solve our trade deficit with China. We have $1 trillion trade deficit with China. Hundreds of billions of dollars a year we lose with China, and unless we solve that problem, I'm not going to make a deal. Now, I'm willing to deal with China, but they have to solve their surplus. We have a tremendous deficit problem with China. They have a surplus of at least $1 trillion a year. I think it's like $1.1 trillion. And I want that solved. And no other president's taken it on. I had to take it on the last time, but then we had a rigged election. No other president's taken it on. And so China is, they say the market's woken. The market, China is right now taking a big hit because everyone knows we're right. They have to pay tariffs because otherwise we have a surplus and they have a surplus with us that is not sustainable.
Mr. President.
And we're talking about $1 trillion. You know that, right? We're not going to lose $1 trillion for the privilege of buying pencils from China.
All right, that was the president on Air Force One last night. But again, it's easy to say, oh, this is horrible and da-da-da. But what is the bigger issue that we're getting at? And I'm going to walk you through some of this last night. But one of it is this massive trade debt with China, deficit with China. And by the way, I can't get over this, but I want to keep going back. Remember all these people, if China joins the WTO, it'll make it more responsible. We'll benefit from this. Have we? Has China benefited? Yeah. Have we? I don't know. I mean, all these people, again, who tell us what we should do and that it's going to end up in these great, great outcomes, they don't seem to have a great track record. And I just say that with context because we're going to get into this in a second. I want you to understand that, I just love all these people who are going on TV now and are tweeting out oh, this is horrible. They're the same people in a lot of cases who gave us very bad advice over and over again about policy that the U.S. should pursue that didn't turn out too well. But they don't face anything, right? And that's what I think is important to understand. Also big on the agenda, the Senate approved the Senate budget bill. Now it's going to the House. I got to be honest with you. This was a big deal that it passed on Saturday. Voted 51-48 to pass it. And I know the Senate's all happy about it. But I'm going to be blunt. It sucks. It sucks. It's weak. It adds more debt, doesn't cover enough spending. And I think there's a bunch of House members that are rightly pissed off. Why are we doing all this? If we're actually, and I hear a bunch of the senators going, well, this is just a blueprint. Okay, well, that's like saying that, I want to build a house and I just have a blueprint for a little shack. But it could be bigger. Then he keeps it, it could, once we get it going. Do you really think that we believe you? If the blueprint doesn't reflect that you're actually going to cut spending, why would we think you would cut spending? It's here's the architect's plans for the house. It's a little shack. But once we get it going, it could get a lot bigger. That's why you have a plan, dummy. And if the plan doesn't suggest cutting spending, then I have no confidence that you'll cut spending. I just don't get this. How dumb do they think we are? Anyway, let me kind of run through the rest of the stuff, and then I want to get into the tariff because I think that's clearly what's going to be dominating, and I want you to get some insight. Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister, here in Washington today. Several meetings with the president. We'll have more on that tomorrow. That's a little hint for you. Little hint. Just know what I'm saying. There's a little bit more to that story. I'll give you it tomorrow. The president bought 75 more days for TikTok. Listen, you guys have been watching the show for a while. You know what I think about this. It's a national security threat, and we should shut this thing down. I get the president wants a new owner, a U.S. owner, because so many kids use it and it was helpful in politics. But China's given no indication they want to sell it. And they said that basically after these tariffs were imposed, that there are no place to deal with it. So we'll see where this thing goes. But let's get back to tariffs, because that's where I wanted to go, and then show you some clips about what the administration's saying on this. You know, if I can just take a quick trip down memory lane, and I just want you to understand this. I'm not necessarily advocating this, but I'm telling you, before we had an IRS, the government was funded on tariffs from 1790 to 1860. Tariffs accounted for 90% of our federal revenue. Now, granted, we were a much smaller government, but it wasn't until 1913 that the first federal income tax existed. So, which basically at that time equates to about $2.3 billion. Think about that. That's how much help we took in today's dollars, and we just gave back $1.4 billion in COVID funds. All right. So the thing that I want you to understand is that in 2019, Trump reintroduced tariffs around 12% of goods entering the United States, and he's brought them back clearly this time to do several things. And this is where I think the administration, if I can be blunt with you, is sending some mixed messages. I am all on board in using these as tools to bring back manufacturing to the United States and to get a better deal for our folks to trade in other countries. That's a deal. Why would we agree to allow a country, to have access to our market if us getting into their market is at like 38 or 50% or whatever, right? I'm for that. But now they're saying, oh, we're going to reimpose a bottom line, like a 10% tariff on every country to use for deficit reduction. The problem I have with that is not that I'm against deficit reduction, because I think you guys know I am. But number one, I want them to cut spending to do that. But number two is, if you think about it from a deal standpoint, if I tell you, hey, you're charging us a 50% tariff to come into your market, we're basically at zero, and you say, fine, I'll take our tariff down. And then I say, oh, by the way, I'm still going to keep it at 10. It makes you less incentivized to deal, doesn't it? I mean, Israel said, we'll take our tariffs down. Several of these countries are now, Zimbabwe said, we'll take them down. There's some other Southeast Asian countries where we do a lot of textile manufacturing that are saying we'll take them down. The problem is, if we don't take it down, then in return, because we sold this as reciprocal, then we have a problem. The country's going to say, well, then we're not taking it down, because if we can't get back to zero, then why are we doing this? The president, by the way, also said that Japan is trying to do this. But I want to share with you like a final analysis. According to the Boston Fed, even in an extreme scenario, if we went to like 60% tariffs on China and 10% on all other countries, they say this would be obviously the extreme, that we could deal with inflation rising 1.4 to 2.2%. But that's not that much different, and just to put the numbers in context, than post-pandemic inflation. So there's going to be some short-term adjustment. It's got to be. Things have been so out of kilter, out of whack for the longest time, with people taking advantage of us, that there is going to be a bit of thing. And the president's making clear, don't watch the stock market. I get it. We've been through this before. I feel bad. If you are near retirement or you rely on funds in the stock market, I feel your pain. I'm sorry. Like no one wants to be the person whose time it is in the barrel when this stuff comes up. But trust me when I say, if you go back, and I'm no economist, but if I look at each one of these market disruptions, it bounces back. In the case of the pandemic, it bounced back way stronger than it was before. So the question is, are what we are pursuing, is it worth it? Is the juice worth the squeeze? I say yeah. And I'm going to explain that in just a second. Because the president was asked, is there some point in which you're willing to cave? Again, on Air Force One, take a look.
Pain in the market. At some point, you're unwilling to tolerate this idea of a Trump good. Is there a threshold?
I think your question is so stupid. I think it's I don't want anything to go down. But sometimes you have to take medicine to fix something. And we have such a horrible, we have been treated so badly by other countries because we had stupid leadership that allowed this to happen. They took our businesses, they took our money, they took our jobs, they moved it to Mexico, they moved it to Canada, they moved a lot of it to China, and it's not sustainable. We're not going to do it. Now we have hundreds of billions of dollars that's pouring into our country on a monthly basis. It's pouring. It's already started because they put tariffs on. and eventually it's going to straighten out, and our country will be solid and strong again.
All right. Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, was on with Tucker Carlson, and I think explains that we weren't exactly on a course that was really stable. I want you to hear a little what he had to say. Take a look.
I'm not happy with what's going on in the market today, but the distribution of equities across households, the top 10% of Americans own 88% of equities, 88% of the stock market. The next 40% owns 12% of the stock market. The bottom 50 has debt. They have credit card bills. They rent their homes. They have auto loans, and we've got to give them some relief. That I was struck by the statistic from last year.
That's the message right there. Just as a bystander, I'm like, wow, okay.
All right. Or that, you know, I like the examples, and I was really struck by two different statistics last year. Summer of 2024, Americans took more European vacations than they had in history. Summer of 2024, more Americans were using food banks than they ever have in history. I went into two food banks near my hometown to ask, what's the story? And they said, you know, it really takes, for a lot of people, it's a loss of dignity to walk in a food bank.
Of course.
But they were seeing a new phenomenon, that it wasn't their traditional clientele. It wasn't people who'd lost their homes. It wasn't people out on the street. These were working families who could no longer, you know, $100 at the grocery store, that basket of groceries every week, they were missing 5, 6, 7 things, and they were coming to the food bank to top up.
All right. You get the point there. Things weren't really good at all. People were in a bad place when Joe Biden was president. I mean, think about what he's describing. People saying, I can't afford these, you know, other things in the basket that I normally get home from the grocery store, so I got to go to the food bank to make up the difference. So for a lot of Americans, they know what this is like. And I know for people at the higher end of the income that you're saying, wow, I'm going to have to pay a lot more maybe for a car. But for a lot of Americans, they were like, I can't even put gas in the car that I have because I couldn't afford things under Joe Biden's economy. Look, here's what I'm going to say. Politicians can do easy things. The easy thing for Trump is to do nothing. It really is, isn't it? Just do nothing. Let China keep running wild. Let the EU keep having whatever it is, a 39% tariff. That's the easy solution. Or you can fight. And I think he's like, I'm not going to be president and just sit back and put my name on the wall for another term and enjoy it. I have 4 years. I know the value of life because they tried to kill me. And I'm going to get stuff done, and I'm going to change the new world order and make sure that we bring stuff back. That's how I'm looking at this, by the way. And if you wonder why the Democrats don't sound sincere, take a look at this little gem from Nancy Pelosi from 1996. Let's play you a portion of it so you get a hint.
How far does China have to go? How much more repression? How big a trade deficit and loss of jobs for the American worker? And how much more dangerous proliferation has to exist before members of this House of Representatives will say, I will not endorse the status quo? As I mentioned, it's about jobs, proliferation, and human rights. And there are those who say we shouldn't link human rights and trade and proliferation and trade. I disagree.
I disagree. It's funny, though. You don't hear her voice now, do you? She wanted to take on China, but she didn't. Think about that. That was 1996, almost 30 years ago. She did nothing. Donald Trump's doing something, and now she wants to critique him. Interesting. By the way, China is definitely not sitting back and taking this. They announced that they're going to oppose a reciprocal 34% tariff on all imports from the United States on April 10th, making good on a promise to strike back. And so this is going to be a big difference. I'll put a chart up on the screen if you're watching to show you these trade deficits that we're talking about. And you can see, if you look at the left, it starts with the 1990s and goes all the way to the far right. when Donald Trump was talking about that trade deficit, he knew what he was talking about. This is massive. I'm just telling you, it's a big deal. All right, I want to play you some of the other clips that are really important. Quick little housekeeping. This week on Wednesday, if you guys remember last year, I did the Road to 270. Went through every state. Everybody loved it. People were sharing it with friends. It was some of our best stuff. And I want to get ready for the 2028 midterms. And on Wednesday, we're going to do, I don't know, the Road to 2028 Senate style. And I'm going to walk through every seat that's up to see whether or not the Senate can stay in Republican hands. If you liked Road to 270, you're going to love this. This is the midterm version of this. So keep an eye on that. And then on Friday, Amy Parntz and Jonathan Allen have that brand new book out, Fight. I have had an early copy of it, and I've been reading it. I have so many questions. If you have questions, put them in the chat. I'll ask them. But it's amazing. Like the decline of Biden, this thing is mind-blowing. Obama stabbing Kamala in the back. I mean, it's crazy. I also wonder, why did no one talk about this? But I'm going to ask all these questions. And tomorrow, by the way, a really cool show. Keith Self, congressman from Texas, has been saying that if you're on food stamps, you shouldn't be able to go buy stuff that's like bad for you. Processed food, big soda, all that stuff. So we're going to have him on. And then Kevin Keene is the head of the American Beverage Institute. They represent Coke, Pepsi. I want him to respond. Why should food stamps be allowed to pay for bad stuff for you? Coke, Pepsi, etc. This is going to be a pretty cool debate. I'm excited. So anyway, this is a big week for the show. Make sure you're subscribing to the newsletter at SeanSpicer.com. I'm going to try to break a lot of this down. And then, by the way, I mentioned this earlier, but on April 9th, we're doing this special private Zoom call. It's Wednesday night, 8 o'clock. I'm going to talk about how I've switched a lot of the products, everything from like soap and shampoo to, the wipes here in the studio, the makeup I use. You could tell, couldn't you? But anyway, if you want to be part of this private Zoom to hear about the products that I'm using now that are MAHA approved, that are better than the woke companies, then text RSVP to 276-500-1185. RSVP to 276-500-1185. And then one last thing before I start getting into it. Every year for the last several years, I've walked in this pancreatic cancer research Purple Stride 5K. I've raised a bunch of money. My father passed away from pancreatic cancer, so I try to do my part. If you would like to donate or give, I'm going to put it on the screen. It's pancan.seanspicer.com. I'm trying to raise several $1,000s for this. So if you can help, that would be awesome. If you know someone who's died of pancreatic cancer, and I hate to say this, but all this cancer research has been eaten up in Doge. And so I need to do my part to step up and help fill that void. So if you can help, I'd love it. pancan.seanspicer.com. Anyway, real quick, before we get to the Sunday show analysis, the tax, you guys know the IRS is the largest collection agency in the world, and Washington loves to spend money. It really doesn't even matter who's in. They've just stepped up all their enforcement because we are in April. That is tax season. They're trying to get all these agents to come after people who haven't paid unfiled taxes, overdue taxes, unfiled returns, you name it. If this is you, if you know someone who has, just trust me when I tell you that don't go up against the government alone, no matter what branch it is, but especially the IRS. You need professional help. The best people in the business, as far as I'm concerned, are the folks at Tax Network USA. And if you go to tnusa.com, /Sean Spicer, full name like Madonna, but just tnusa.com/Sean Spicer. You can get in touch with them. Now, I'm just going to tell you this. There's a lot of people, you see a lot of ads for people who do this. Tax Network USA has been around for a long time. They know all of the people at the IRS, who you can deal with, who you can't. They've got a preferred direct access line. No waiting. They know exactly who to call, who they can deal with, and they've recovered over $1 billion for their clients. So don't worry about the threatening letters and the calls. Make them all stop by giving a call. It's absolutely free to talk to one of their strategists. Just give them a call at 1-800-905-8000 or go to tnusa.com/Sean Spicer. All right. I've told you guys before about my buddy Leo Grillo. He is the founder of Delta Rescue. He found a Doberman on the roadside years ago, and he named the dog Delta, which stands for dedication and everlasting love to animals. Leo turned that one act of kindness into Delta Rescue. And if you go to deltarescue.org, you'll see the videos for what I'm talking about. DeltaRescue.org is the world's largest no-kill sanctuary. What do I mean by that? They're not looking to house these dogs and cats and horses, not find a new home, not for adoption. Leo takes everything in. So when people abandon them, mistreat dogs and cats and all sorts of animals, they're malnutrition, he takes them in for life. It's so amazing what Leo Grillo is doing out there. But he doesn't have any big USAID or government grants. He relies on donations from people like me and you. I've said this before. Here's my little tax receipt letter. We're truly honored by your thoughtful generosity. Delta Rescue acknowledges your contribution. I made a personal contribution as a animal lover, a dog lover. I wanted to help Leo Grillo, and he needs your help too. So if you go to deltarescue.org, you'll be able to make a contribution. This isn't something the government's doing. More importantly, when you're at deltarescue.org, you'll see that estate planning tip. If you've got an old 401k or you might or stock, you might get a tax benefit if you actually can make this part of your estate and make Delta Rescue an enduring mission. So go to deltarescue.org and check it out. All right. I played this. I put a clip together over the weekend that some people saw, but I wanted to do a little breakup, but I want to put it back up on the screen. This shows the share of global manufacturing. And on the far left hand, you'll see a red line. That's China. Back in 2003, they were just about 10% of the global share of GDP. Today, they are over 30. Conversely, in 2003, the United States was at about 24%, and we are now just over 15. When you take the United States, Japan, and Germany right now today, combine us all, we don't even match China. This is why all of this stuff matters. We're not making stuff anymore. And that's an existential threat to our very being, militarily, economically. And we have to understand that. If we keep kicking the can down the road, we won't build stuff in this country anymore. Because it's become so attractive to go do it everywhere else. That's a problem for our industrial base, whether it's munitions or ships. I mean, you get into the national security aspect, we don't build stuff anymore. That's a problem. But I want to play you this real clip. Michael Schellenberg had a guy named Orrin Cass on his podcast, Public. And it was really cool because Orrin Cass actually was a Romney guy. He was the domestic policy advisor on Romney. You would think this guy's a globalist. But he had this great conversation. I want to play you a second of it. Take a listen.
We have to pay attention to our fellow Americans, and that this system that we have been on for too long has really undermined their ability. And yes, there's other things going on. I'm a huge critic of fentanyl and the drug, all of that. We have a big addiction problem. We have a problem of nihilism. We have a problem of decadence. But fundamentally, you've got to have high pay, good jobs, making things that are essential to national security. I mean, I just think the whole, Ricardo argument of comparative advantage, all that falls apart when you get to microchips. If you're not making, how much more of a dramatic case do you need than the fact that they're made in Taiwan and China's going to take over Taiwan? Yeah. Like that, sometimes I wake up and I'm actually afraid. I'm like, why do we not have any chip plants yet? Like, we're actually moving way too slow. Plus, you need some PPE, as we saw during COVID.
All right. You see that there. It's not just manufacturing stuff. We're not manufacturing the stuff we need. I've said this before, so you've heard it if you're a longtime listener of the show. China sends us a virus, a worldwide pandemic sent from it. And then we turn to them and say, could we buy some PPE from you, sir? How insane is that? We have got to get our priorities in order. And like I said, the easy thing is to do nothing politically. President Trump's willing to stake it all on the floor, and put it all out there and fight for us. I get it. If you're looking at your 401k today, probably not a good day. You think I'm looking excited? No. But the question is, what kind of country do I want my kids and their kids to live in? One where we don't build anything and we're completely dominated by China, or one in which we were willing to actually bring back some stuff here. Scott Bessent was on Meet the Press making the case. I want you to take a look at what he had to say.
this has been years in the building, years in the making. This unsustainable system, our trading partners have taken advantage of us. We can see that through the large surpluses. We can see this through the large budget deficits. And also, Kristen, this is a national security problem, which we saw during COVID. We saw during COVID that optimal supply chains are not resilient. And what I could say is the only good outcome from COVID is it was a beta test for what would happen if our supply chains got broken. And President Trump has decided that we cannot be at risk like that for our crucial medicines, for semiconductors, for shipping. And we are going to move forward so the American people can know that they are going to have a more secure future.
Boom. Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary, also out there making the case. Take a listen to what he said, because it's similar, but I want you to understand the magnitude of this. It's not just, oh, we can't get cheap stuff anymore. This is real stuff. Take a listen to the Commerce Secretary.
You've got to realize this is a national security issue. I mean, we don't make medicine in this country anymore. We don't make ships. We don't have enough steel and aluminum to fight a battle. Right? All our semiconductors are made overseas, so every button we press when we try to start our car or even use our microwave, these are all semiconductors. They're all made elsewhere. We've got to start to protect ourselves, and we've got to stop having all the countries of the world ripping us off. We have a $1.2 trillion trade deficit, and the rest of the world has a surplus with us. They're earning our money. They're taking our money.
Right.
And Donald Trump has seen this, and he's going to stop it. So it is going to be a big change. Of course it's going to be a big change, but the rest of the world has been ripping us off for all these many years. Donald Trump has seen it. He's spoken about it.
I understand
and he's just
that.
not going to take it anymore, and that's his model.
By the way, it's clearly Howard Lutnick's turn to make Margaret Brennan look like an idiot. Well done. But beyond the national security point, which I think is huge and important, right? You know where I stand on this. There's an economic point. And Scott Bessent made that point as well. I want you to play this. Take a look.
Kristen, what I like is data. And if we look at data from President Trump's first term, and there's a big study that just came out from a group of economists, mostly at MIT, that showed that a 20% tariff on China led to a 0.7% tax or price level increase over 4 years. I think that's pretty good. If we can take in 20% in tariffs and it's a 0.7% increase. And Kristen, the little publicized story this week, everyone wants to look at the stock market going down. You know what else went down? Oil prices went down almost 15% in 2 days, which impacts working Americans much more than the stock market does. Interest rates hit their low for the year, so I'm expecting the mortgage applications to pick up.
Well, just to be very clear, though, I mean, during President Trump's first terms, the cost to Americans was nearly $80 billion in new taxes due to his tariffs. Prices did go up on everything from washing machines to tires.
Well, no. But let's go back. The aggregate number was 0.7, so we can discern the individual things. Also, households saw real net wages go up. So if wages go up faster than prices, which is not what happened over the past 4 years, that's why the bottom 50% got eviscerated.
You know, you don't hear that, though, right? What he just said. Think about this for a second. Wages went up faster than prices, so net, that's good for you. Oil's going down. Mortgage rates are going down. The media wants to tell you that the sky is falling and everything's bad. And I get it. I have a 401k. I've got a retirement account. I look at it. But net, think about what he's saying with respect to China over 4 years. How much we took in and what we paid for that. That's a good thing. All of these companies that we talk about in the past that are coming back here, Taiwan Semiconductor, Hyundai, Apple, they're doing it because of these policies. More investment in the United States. That's great. More jobs in the United States. That's great. You can't just get that, though, by like snapping your fingers or waving a magic wand and saying, would you please like to come back? They have to see policies that say it makes sense to be here. Our bottom line, why do you think they left in the first place? Not because they love the weather in Uzbekistan. It's because they said it's cheaper to do business. we can sell more stuff. If the United States becomes more attractive to do business in, they'll come back here. They'd rather operate under our rules. We know that. So just remember that. And the stats that Secretary Bessent put out there speak to that. Oil's down, so when you go fill up your car, I noticed it driving carpool. When I drive through town, I see the prices are down, right? It's like $2.90 a gallon for unleaded. Wasn't like that for the last 4 years, was it? Price of eggs, down. Interest rates, down. But they don't want to talk about that on TV or in the Washington Post. They just tell you about your stock market. The other thing that they're not talking about, and here's Kevin Hassett. What's the goal? Europe, pick your country, has this tariff. Where's my list? Right here, right? Here's all these countries. 67 China, Vietnam 90, 72 Thailand, Switzerland 61. I thought they were neutral. It's not. These are all the tariffs they charged. Once they knew these reciprocal tariffs were going on, what did they do? Kevin Hassett, what did they do? I'm going to hear from you.
I got a report from the USTR last night that more than 50 countries have reached out to the president to begin a negotiation. But they're doing that because they understand that they bear a lot of the tariff. And so I don't think that you're going to see a big effect on the consumer in the U.S. because I do think that the reason why we have a persistent long-run trade deficit is these people have very inelastic supply. They've been dumping goods into the country in order to create jobs, say, in China.
Okay. So again, remember this. They're calling. The president just said today that Japan was calling. Israel's here today. Vietnam. They're all trying to get a deal. So yes, 3 days of your 401k going up and down like an EKG. I get it. Not great. But in the long term, if we can do things that get manufacturing back and greater market access, is it worth it? Or would you rather keep getting ripped off for another generation? If you're a rancher or you're a farmer, I mean, I talked to these pork producers a few weeks ago, and they said for every pig, we can only sell basically, there's 2 pieces of whatever, but they can only sell about half of it in the U.S. market share wise. The other half they have to export. The nose goes to China. I mean, all these parts that we wouldn't eat in America, they go somewhere. People love that stuff. I don't know why, but they do. And they can't get the rest of the pig into other markets because of their tariff rates. If they can, guess who wins? Our farmers, our ranchers. They win. This is more than just, a trade war. It's bringing these tariffs down to allow market access. But remember, all of the same people, I alluded to this a little while ago, who told us about how they're so convinced that everything's going to go wrong. Kevin Hassett, again, I want to play a clip from him because the historical context is important. These same people told us to pursue policies. And I want Kevin Hassett, the director of the National Economic Council for the president, to talk about this for a second, because you're not getting this piece in the CNN, Washington Post political news. Take a listen.
The fact is that if there were going to be a heavy burden on the U.S. consumer, then this trade deficit that for 30 years we've seen really since China entered the WTO would be something that would have gone down. It would have gone down over time. It would have responded to the prices. The bottom line is that China entered the WTO in 2000. In the 15 years that followed, real incomes declined about $1,200 cumulatively over that time. And so if cheap goods were the answer, if cheap goods were going to make Americans' real wages, real welfare better off, then real incomes would have gone up over that time. Instead, they went down because wages went down more than prices went down. So we got the cheap goods at the grocery store, but then we had fewer jobs. And that's why President Obama and Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi and President Trump have come out saying we've got to come up with a better policy, a policy that treats our workers fairly compared to everybody else. And now President Trump, true to his word, just like he promised during the campaign, just like he put into his campaign platform, he's delivering on his word.
So all the people who told us, oh, when China goes into the WTO, that's going to be a good thing. That's a great thing. All of these people that you're hearing from, probably to a T, said that. What is Hassett saying there? Real incomes declined about $1,200 over that time. So you made less money. This context is critical to understanding what's happening. Yes, you can get cheaper crap from China, but it's actually affecting your wages. Those are going down. They're not keeping up because we can buy cheaper stuff. And we sit here and go, oh, what's going on? Like, how did this happen? Because the same geniuses that told us that we should do all this stuff are now saying, oh, well, guess what's not going to happen? Maybe, just maybe, the same people who told us that Donald Trump couldn't win, the same people who told us that, are wrong too. He has defied their expectations, defied their so-called conventional wisdom and expertise over and over and over again. Maybe it's time that we tried something different. Listen, I got a lot on the line. You do too. I get that. Retirement accounts, savings. I'm not happy about it. I look at my account. But I also know that if you care about the country and you care about the future, then maybe it's worth a week or a month of disruption. It may take a couple days for it to rejigger itself. But let's not panic. Like, think about it. I mean, imagine if you went on a diet and the first day you went, wow, this is killing me. It's killing me. What do you think's going to happen? You think you should have just waved your magic wand and you would have lost 20 pounds? It's not easy. Do you want to be really good in a sport? You think you just stand up to the line and dunk a ball? No. You practice, you work out. It's hard. Donald Trump in that clip we played earlier talked about taking your medicine. I get it. It's been decades of us getting whacked around and treated like crap. So it's not going to happen overnight. I'm not saying that this should take a few years, but I'm saying understand that he's got to take it seriously. For everyone who says, oh, he should just pause this. You think they're going to take him seriously if he pauses all this right off the bat? Not going to happen. I mentioned the farmers and ranchers. Brooke Rollins was on CNN explaining the reality of what's going on to farmers and ranchers to Jake Tapper, because I'm sure he's ever been on a farm or a ranch in his life. Take a listen to what the Ag Secretary has to say.
You've got 2 days of data. Everyone, especially on your side, on the left, is freaking out.
I'm not on the left.
But at the end of the day, listen, this whole concept, all right, Jake, thank you. This whole concept is about rebuilding an American economy around American good.
All right. That was awesome. That was my clip of the day, by the way. But I want to show you what she actually said about ranchers and farmers and the reality that they have. Take a look.
The bottom line is this. In the last 4 years, the cost of inputs for our farmers went up 30%. In the last 4 years, we had an agriculture export deficit that increased from zero when President Trump left to $49 billion. Our farming and our farmers and ranchers are hurting. They are operating at margins of profit that are thinner than they have in a really long time due to the policies of the last 4 years. But to Senator Tillis's point, we have to be prepared that if there is longer term damage, and this president has been very focused on this, and I've been saying it pretty much ad nauseum for the last 50 days since I've been in office, is that we will make sure that we have the funds, in working with the senators and working with the appropriators, that we can do what we did last time, which I think Secretary Perdue last time spent about $25 to $28 billion to mitigate some of the fallout from the last tariffs for the short term. The long term, the tariffs worked. I mean, the research shows that we had an increase in productivity, increase in jobs, et cetera, until, frankly, the Biden administration stopped enforcing some of those, the deal once we left office in 2021.
Now, again, this is important. In the last 4 years, this is what the Secretary of Agriculture, Brooke Rollins, saying right there. The cost of inputs for our farmers went up 30%. In 4 years, in the last 4 years, we had an agricultural export deficit that increased from zero when President Trump left office to $49 billion. Do you realize? I mean, without context, I get it why people are freaking out. But if you're a farmer or rancher trying to do business and get a good deal, they're living, in many cases, crop to crop, season to season. And when I ask them, they're willing to fight. Not everyone, but most of them are saying, hey, look, we can't keep doing this the way it is. We can't make it. And if we do, we're going to have to sell our farm because our next generation doesn't want to take it over. There are serious problems. And I'm just telling you, like, this is not easy. This is going to be disruptive. I get it. But it was interesting. Of all places, Axios had a story out that gave some actual interesting context that I want to read you. It says, Trump is right that plenty of countries engage in unfair trade practices and that globalization has hollowed out key parts of America's industrial base. Oh, now we're going to say it? China, the world's second largest economy, has a long record of trade abuses, IP theft, intellectual property, forced technology transfers, meaning if you do business in there, they get to come and take all of your technology, state subsidies and market access restrictions for foreign countries. Okay, so in other words, again, they steal from us. They won't let us into their market. What more should we do? Just keep letting that happen? The European Union, according to Axios, doesn't cheat the way China does, but it protects its own through generous agricultural subsidies and strict regulatory standards that often double as trade barriers. Our farmers and ranchers can't get into those markets. And by the way, like in a lot of cases, they want our stuff. In the 1970s, this is Axios again, a quarter of Americans worked in manufacturing. Now less than 10% do. Recruiting and training a manufacturing workforce will take time and money. Yes. So anyway, I think this is one of the points that I want to get through to you guys is context matters. We've allowed China and the rest of these countries to take advantage of us. And we all thought it was in the context, oh, well, they'll be responsible stakeholders and they'll do this. Are you kidding me? They were like, shouldn't be this easy the way we're ripping you guys off. Here's the deal. I'm not excited about the stock market or my 401k, but I am willing to give this president the time to fight because every other president in a bipartisan basis in modern history has given us a ton of excuses why we can't do certain things. President Trump easily could say, it's easy. He's not. He's willing to fight. So let's have his back. Let's stand with him to try to allow this to occur because it's not going to be easy. As I said, tomorrow, Congressman Keith Self of Texas is going to argue why welfare recipients should not be eligible for things like soda. And then Kevin Keene, who is the CEO of the American Beverage Institute, is going to tell us why he disagrees with that. Wednesday's the midterm rundown. We're going to talk about every Senate seat. And then we've got a big Friday with Amy Parnes and Jonathan Allen on their new book about Biden's decline called Fight. My next newsletter comes out Tuesday. Sign up at SeanSpicer.com. Thanks for kicking off your week for us. I really appreciate it. Share this show with 5 friends for me, will you? Thank you very much. I'll see you back here tomorrow on the Sean Spicer Show. Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.